we moved. My rule of thumb is once a month, and I begin to hesitate. I'm already questioning myself on that in this heat we're having. Once a month, get out there and soak the ground under your tree. That's once a month. That's not very often. If you do that from May to September, in most years, in normal years, whatever that is, once a month, May to September, your big old native trees are just going to go right through whatever horrible weather, you know, we're going through. The younger the tree is, the more recently it has been planted, the more often you have to water it. So let's go to the other extreme. Let's say last winter you planted a tree, a shade tree. So this is its first summer. Ideally, for a new tree, you're really, if your soil is draining well, which is a big if, you water that tree 3 times a week. And what I like to see is I like to see a little earthen saucer, a little bowl, like a little tub built around the tree. Let's say you have a new tree you planted, the root ball is this big. So you dug the hole. That little saucer that you're going to construct needs to be, here's the hole, needs to be on the outside edge of the hole so that when you water the root ball, the water goes down the hole you dug. A lot of people have these saucers way over here so that the water doesn't go down the sides of the root ball. Very important to go down the sides of the root ball. For one thing, that's where you really want to stimulate the roots the most, because the goal of starting a new little tree here is to establish it, it's called, get a tree established. Established means when the tree roots broke out of the hole that you dug for it and they're growing into the soil beside the hole you dug for it. And that's why it's so important to get that water down the side. So ideally, and what people that have really studied this situation say, is that for the first summer, or 2 or 3 here in Central Texas, in Houston you can establish a tree in 1 year. You cannot do it here, or rarely can you do it here. I mean, I can't even do it here. It takes me 2 or 3 years to get my trees established. It's really important to water right in that root ball. So ideally you water 3 times a week. It's like frequent, you back off. After a few months, I like to see us back off from that. You go to twice a week. Once a week will work on a new young tree if you're really vigilant about it. That's what I do. I don't water my young trees more than once a week. I just don't have time to water them more than once a week. A lot of people put automatic irrigation to their trees, and we're not talking about mist sprinklers now. We're talking about bubblers that put out a lot of water. That's a way of ensuring your trees get watered. And what I've learned the last few years, the more trees that have automatic bubblers to them, those trees almost always get established. Whereas homeowners, you know, often, or depending on hand watering, and I don't put bubblers to mine, folks, I hand water. Homeowners just, you know, it's harder to make sure you get it done. That's like a once a week commitment to start a tree here for 2 or 3 years. You know, my old joke about that is people can't even make a once a week commitment to their kids, much less a tree. You know, so that's a huge commitment. One of the things that you know that I find almost every week, I keep saying to myself, you're just not emphasizing tree planting enough. Because, you know, with our trees dying, with the trouble we're having with trees, starting a new young tree is so darn important. So if you've never actually nurtured a tree from the container to establishment, you are missing one of the great satisfying things in life. I am not kidding you. It is just amazing. I mean, I love gardening, I love trees, I love my children, I love my granddaughter. I just love starting young trees. It's a wonderful thing. So do take advantage of that. Rosina.
Shameless promotion here that I forgot to tell you before. The trees are on sale. It's not the ideal time to plant. We realize that. But if you would like to get a tree on sale, that's through tomorrow.
You all, and one of the things you can do, you know, for a tree you buy it now, and my advice is that you plant, the planting window in Central Texas is November through January. It's a pretty narrow window. You know, really you can start planting as soon as the hot weather breaks here, but you know, you don't ever know where that is exactly. You know, it might break and then come back to you. Yes, ma'am.
We have 4 acres with some very well established live oaks. Is there anything we need to or can do to promote their health or continue their good health?
You know, I used to say there wasn't much a person could do when asked that question. But I have realized over time that I'm wrong at saying there's nothing you can do, because one of the most important things you could do would be get more mulch under them, or get less, or have less grass and more mulch. You know, even out in a pasture, just, you know, get some old manure, old leaves, old bales of hay, you know, organic matter under your trees. Because a lot of those trees sitting out in the pasture got, you know, caliche under them. You know, maybe a little soil. So yes, there's something you can do. You all, I'm going to go back and we're going to talk about watering some more. Because with watering, you have to be aware or conscious of exactly, you know, what you're watering. Are you watering a tree that's, you know, was already there, a well-established native tree, or are you watering, you know, a new young tree that's been planted in the last few years? One of the things I've noticed this summer, and I think it's the first summer that I've seen that in the 30 years that I've been here, I am seeing young trees that were established. In other words, these are trees that were planted like, let's say, up to 10 years ago. And so after 3 or 4 years, they were really growing well and doing well. And, you know, and normally we say, okay, well, you don't have to worry about the once-a-week watering anymore once your trees are really going well. I am seeing a lot of trees die in Central Texas that are not being watered that were planted 10 years ago. You know, they're just not strong enough to withstand this heat we're having. And if people were watering those once a month, those trees would still be doing okay, but they're just not watering them. And in fact, my best example recently, I did a consultation up at State Farm at Palmer and 620, that huge complex they had. Well, you know, all these big, huge complexes have big, huge landscape companies working on the grounds. You know, it's the only way they can deal with them. And so, you know, our normal practice and what we've said for many years is you get a tree established, get it growing good, then you can turn off the water to it. Save the water, put the water someplace else. Well, so last year, this didn't even happen this year, it happened last year. Got there a whole lot of, you know, always planting trees, always got new trees going, always trying to get established trees. Well, they had a whole lot of trees that they just the year before had turned the water off to. And then last summer hit. And they called me out there because they said, the irrigator killed these trees because they turned the water off to them. I said, no, wait a second, that's not exactly what happened. What happened was the weather is killing these trees. And the irrigator was following standard practices. Well, then, you know, they didn't have a whole lot of leg to stand on with the irrigator. But the point I'm making is that what we're learning is, well, you just can't go off and walk away from those trees, you know, if you planted them 6, 7, 8, 10, you know, maybe longer than that years ago. You've got to keep watching them. You got to look at them. You got to pay attention to them, because even our live oaks, which normally do not show heat and drought stress, listen, I'm beginning to see it and I'm beginning to recognize it because it's beginning to be around. Yes, sir.
I've heard of a technique in establishing like a tree in a pot. You soak it in a thing of water for like 3 or 4 hours, and when the roots get spongy, then you plant it and you kind of manipulate the roots and kind of spread it out a little bit to prevent the root girdling. Is that something you would recommend?
Well, it's a good way of watering trees, but the root girdling has to do with the roots that are already there, that are already too large, and you often have to cut those as well as doing all those other steps that you were talking about. Yeah, I'm wanting to concentrate on watering a little bit more, and so if you got questions, I want it to be on watering, please. Any questions on watering?
You said once a month soak the ground under your trees, and when you say soak the ground, what do you mean?
Well, so what I mean is that often 1 hour of sprinkling, if you've got a really good soil, is a good soaking with a sprinkler. That's not a mist spray. That's hitting the ground with quite a bit of water in an hour. So that's what I mean. That's a good soaking. And so if you've got a really large tree,